Hello, friends, and welcome in to Mississippi State Live, where we celebrate traditions, a tradition unlike any other, such as, Magnolia Lane, Amen Corner, Bryson DeChambeau sending all of his short irons flying well past the green and off to the left because he can't control distances to save his life with his stupid single-length irons. Traditions like that. It's all the wonderful, best things that we have going for us here on this Thursday. Already got a Hail State in the chat from Sven. Thank you, Sven. Glad to have you here. It's Mississippi State Live. But even though it's a state live show, I'm probably going to be rambling about the Masters a lot. Day one was already fantastic. ESPN's attempts to destroy this sacred tournament will not. Their attempts failed. We still had wonderful golf played today, despite ESPN's best efforts. But yeah, it is a state show. Obviously, we're going to talk about Mississippi State. Mississippi State Live here on a Thursday. Andrew Miller, call-in show opportunity for you guys to come be a part of the stream if you'd like to. We have a stream link pinned to the top of the chat, also in the description of the video. Listener Q&A. It's only a couple questions. I've got our guy Spin left me one, and then I got one from a friend in a group chat that I'll hit. But hey, that's fine. I know it was a new idea, and we don't have to have a lot of questions. I'm also going to go into some different stuff, though. I've got things to watch for, what we're hoping to learn out of State's spring game. Trey Clark, if State goes 8-4 or better, will you shave your beard completely? That's a great question, and I would have to. Here's the thing, man. All right. I maybe would compromise and trim it down potentially. I don't know. I'm not committing to anything at this point. The thing is, I've been clean shaven in the past. It's been a while. So before I let the beard grow out, like a few years, like this is going on like now 2.5 years of me doing this. I used to like have the facial hair and I kept it pretty tight, trimmed up, which was fine because if I shaved completely, dude, I'm baby faced as could be. It does not help that I am a fat man, and it makes it look way worse. The beard is needed. It's needed. So I don't know, but I don't know. Perhaps it'd be worth it. I could grow it back. I would contemplate such things if State put together an 8-4 type season, because that would be a great year, all things considered. But yeah, I'm going to talk about things we're hoping to see from the spring game, what we're hoping to learn. A few quick thoughts on baseball, with this series against Tennessee. And obviously, again, if anybody wants to join the stream, you are more than welcome to. We can get into that and chat about whatever. But yeah, glad to be here tonight. Will be a pretty chill show, but that's fine. If you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and have those notifications turned on so you do know we do go live. And if you're wondering, if you're a first-time listener wondering when we go live Mondays, 6 p.m. Central Time, Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central Time. Mondays are, and we have Sven in the chat. I'll bring him in here just in a sec. Already joining in. We love to see it. Let me get through my promo stuff, Sven. We'll bring you on. Monday nights generally just our typical, breaking down whatever the latest news is, whatever big topics discussion. Thursdays, that's a call-in show as well as Q&A. So I'll put out a call for questions. If you have any of that stuff that you would like to hear about, we'll definitely get into it. And of course, if you just want to join the stream, you're more than welcome to as well. And then we could talk about all that. Plus, if there's any news, we'll hit that on Thursdays as well. If you can't catch the show live and need to listen after the fact, you can catch Mississippi State Live on all your favorite audio platforms, streaming-wise. Love having you all here on YouTube, but obviously understand sometimes it's easier to go back in the podcast form, so we do that as well. All right, we have Sven in. Let's bring him on stage. How's it going?
Good morning.
Yeah, I know it is morning for you. Good morning to you.
Yeah, it's 2:08 a.m.
Okay,
here.
yeah. I have learned 7 p.m. for us is 2 for you. So
yeah,
I'm learning.
Good. Andrew, I'm not sold on this team.
Okay.
from what I saw. I think if we go 6-6, it would be a miracle. Serious. I mean, our secondary, I have absolutely no worries about our secondary. No worries. What me worries is the pass rush and both lines. I trust Lebby. Lebby is one of the best offensive minds there is. If you give him 5 right receivers and a halfway capable quarterback, he will get his numbers. This is like Lane Kiffin or Lincoln Riley. These guys, they are offensive minds. They get it done. I mean, you see Evans at Georgia, he had 300 yards. And if Evans is our number one, he will have way over 1,000 this year. I'm absolutely sure about this. But I don't see how we can block for fluff and how we can protect Camario's blind side and how we can stop teams running on us. I mean, they don't throw against Mississippi State because everybody knows we had Isaac Smith, we had a lockdown first round draft pick on the as a cornerback, and nobody throws. If they want to win, they run the ball. And even bad teams like Arizona State last year, I mean, they get it in the second half. They run on us. It was unbelievable. And I didn't see progress. I don't know. I mean, 6-6, I take it. Serious. But I don't see 6-6. 6-6 is the absolute ceiling. I think we can beat our 3 non-con teams and maybe upset 1, 4-8. I don't see it. But maybe you saw something in the spring game, what I didn't see.
Well, it hasn't happened yet. So, which I'll also say, and I'm going to hit this point again later, I will not be able to see the spring game because...
No, sorry, I mean the spring practice.
Well, I'm not at practices either. And frankly, for what it's worth, we actually had Sam Sklar of the Clarion Ledger on our SEC show last night. And he had some good insight on some things for State, just kind of doing a preview of several SEC teams that are going to have spring practices or spring games / spring scrimmages in State's case this weekend. And, Sam did point out, Lebby only gives them the first 15 minutes of practice, half of which is them stretching. So they don't get to see too much. Look, to your question about the offensive line thing, that's going to be the biggest thing we're watching for this tomorrow, and hope I say tomorrow, Saturday. And like I said, unfortunately, I'm not going to be in Starkville. I live 4 hours away, and getting up there is difficult at times. Plus, it's not televised, which I hate. I'm hoping that there's someone who will be at the game that puts out a lot of great clips on Twitter. That'd be very helpful for anybody who's going to be there. I know why they're not televising it, but I wish they would just do that. But that's another conversation. So I'm going to be going by whatever gets reported out of this, and that's going to be where my takeaways are. Some of the optimism is maybe not the right word. I know the past few weeks I've turned a little bit more of a positive leaf on this team. I can argue either way. And look, I've told you before, like I can fully understand your holdups on this team, and I can't fault you for feeling anyway. And some of it I do share. Some of those concerns I've had myself. I guess my slight areas for optimism for the team itself is some of the stuff I've talked about, that I do think there's a lot of position groups that are going to be in a really good spot that I feel very confident in. And yes, the lines of scrimmage are the most important, but let me do talk about the defense a little bit first, because that's the part where I am more optimistic there. between the two.
We should be. Arnett is a good defensive coordinator, and he will get his defense done.
Right, and that's a big part of it for me is, like, I do think they will at least take a nice step forward on that side of the ball. And I do think even for the defensive line, for some of the concerns that are there, I think it's SEC caliber players in the room. Now, edge rusher, we'll see what happens there. But I go back 2023, and this is what I compared to quite a bit. That was a defense that there were a few games early in the year, the LSU, South Carolina games, where, they really got lit up.
Yeah.
A lot of that season, though, the defense actually performed decently well.
But we had in 23, 24, we had two absolute studs at linebacker. Absolute studs.
We did.
Boogie Watson, Jet Johnson. I mean, these guys saved us the seasons at the end.
No, for sure. Like, Buki and Jet were definitely a big part of that. But what I would say is, I think this year's secondary top to bottom is better because you don't like Kelly Jones and Isaac Smith. I know Isaac Smith was on – both of them were on that team, but obviously neither of them were the players that they are now. Having Kelly and Isaac Smith plus the return – I talked about earlier in the week all the pieces I'm really excited about in the secondary. I think you have a better secondary than that group does. I'm not sitting here telling you State's linebackers are going to be as good as Buki and Jet, but I think Zachary Tillman, Tyler Lockhart, Jalen Smith, Darian Gillette, I think they're going to be good at linebacker. So it comes down to defensive line. If you remember, going back to that 2023 D-line, Jaden Crumedy was there. Crumedy was a very good interior lineman. Nathan Pickering was very up and down.
He was.
State needed him to take over that Cam Young role in the middle, and he really didn't. He showed flashes all throughout his career, but even in his final season, never fully clicked for him being this, even just being the space eater in the middle that they needed him, which I will say Arnett choosing to drop him as a spy against Jaden Daniels, that's maybe something that I would not repeat this time around with whoever your nose tackle is going to be. But regardless, look, Crumedy was a very good player. I wouldn't rule out one of these interior defensive linemen giving you similar performance to that. And the other reason I bring up 2023, the big concern going into that year, you were losing Tyrus Wheat, you were losing Randy Charlton. And we were saying, what are they going to be at edge rusher? What is that team going to have off the edge? And that season, State's edge rushers, if you remember, Don Terry Russell as a true freshman got thrown in. DeMonte's younger brother. Because DeMonte did not perform. Deontay Anderson did not perform. The guys State had at edge that season, just John Lewis and who am I forgetting? The other line, JP Purvis. Those were the two guys that kind of took over at the Sam linebacker spot. They didn't perform. So State did not get anything from their edge rushers that season at all. We have talked about edge being a massive concern for this team, understandably so. You are banking on guys who have its potential over production. What I'm saying, though, is we have evidence of this specific defense being effective despite not having consistent pass rush threats and defensive line being okay, not great. Obviously, if you want to question that this defensive line this year is still going to be okay, not great, that's fair. But I could see Will Whitson being a guy. I could see –
if he stays healthy.
Sure. Dalen Evans as a transfer coming over.
Whitson will be good. If he can play, he is good. He is good.
I could buy into Calvin Dinkins taking another step just because I get it. Dinkins is going into his last year, but the guy's been hurt so much in his career that it's really probably slowed his development. He's finally getting a second full season, knock on wood, of him being fully healthy going into another year. So I could see another step forward there. So I think State's interior defensive line, or at least their true D-line bodies, I think they'll be okay there. It's whether or not you get the edge rush stuff. But like I said, we have evidence of this exact defense, I think, with a worse secondary than you're going to have this year. Better linebackers than you'll have this year. But again, I think the linebackers this year are going to be good. Being good enough for State to be competitive. So if you get that and then you take a step forward on the offensive side of the ball, you're okay. Now, to the other side, O-line, again, until we see it, it's going to be a question. And that's the big thing to watch. There have been some – so this is going off message board, right? Because, again, I don't have sources. Someone who apparently got to see the spring scrimmage, the first one they did, had at least said that the last group they put in for O-line over their final few series performed pretty well. And there's been some talk coming, like Levy went the other day, said, I think our top 5 is in a good spot. Now, you got to have depth. You got to be able to rotate bodies on offensive line and still not have a massive drop-off. Granted, at the same time, though, State having a top 5 that would be good at O-line is an improvement over what they had a season ago. And, Levy, to be fair, and I know like other podcasts have brought this up, Levy has not necessarily shied away from telling the truth about offensive line to this point. Now, he was probably singing a little bit of a similar tune last fall, but we do have to take into account the injuries they suffered up front last season. That made a difference. So I can see, believe me, I get the concerns. And if they go out and they look terrible tomorrow, that's
the problem I have, Andrew, is this. We have a good young quarterback. I don't say very good. We have a good young quarterback who can be great next year. So, but if you destroy this kid in his first full season because the O-line can't stop anybody, it will produce not how you say it in English, the confidence. He is not sure if he can throw the ball, if his offensive line or his left tackle or his right tackle can hold the defense for 2.5 seconds or 3 seconds, that he can throw to Evans downfield. You know what I mean? So,
sure.
And as a quarterback, you have to have a short memory. But he is, I call it a freshman. He played a lot last year, but he was not the man. And if you rip him apart against South Carolina, Alabama, the first few games, his confidence goes down. I mean, he will not leave Mississippi State. I'm absolute 1,000% sure about this, because he was in the stands as a Mississippi State fan. He grew up 20 minutes from Wade Stadium, and but you have to protect this kid. He is our future.
Look, I totally agree. I had a sentiment similar. I mean, I think I put this out at the end of last season that you cannot turn this into a Lenore Sellers situation in South Carolina, where Sellers is an incredibly talented player. I think he gets overrated to an extent in terms of his prospects of a draft player, but in terms of his athletic ability and as a college quarterback, Lenore Sellers, had he been playing in a better offense with a better offensive line in front of him the last few years, could have been putting up ridiculous numbers because of the talent that he has. Yeah. And unfortunately, everything around him has been problematic, specifically the offensive line. You're hoping you can't do that to Camario, because Camario is that type of a talent that you have to fix it. Again, we will definitely see. I understand the concern for sure. I am starting to have. I'll admit, I'm starting to buy into hype. Right, I'm letting myself be positive on this because I kind of want to be. Yeah, and it's just taking little tidbits of like, hey, this offensive line is actually coming together well, and letting it convince me. I think there's other things offensively they could do to help them out. I talked about it a ton last season. Their inability to do anything effective in the screen game, the perimeter screens and stuff out to the edge to help also loosen up the box really hurt them as an offense, because that not having that element of the game in this offense especially, it put even more pressure on being able to block it correctly up front, and they just had the issues they did. So that's something that hopefully they can get corrected. I do want to go back to like your very first point on this all, like 6-6 being a great season. I mean, I agree, and that's setting aside any optimism I have about this team, because the schedule is very tough. And
this is really hard.
Minnesota in week 2. Like, I think there's probably gonna be a lot of Mississippi State fans I'm going to assume a lot of State fans are going to mark that up as a win. And Minnesota on the road, that's going to be very difficult.
This is a toss-up.
Yeah,
this is a 50-50 shot.
That's a good program with a good coach, and they bring back a lot of pieces from a season ago. That's something I've looked at. They're one of the top returning teams of production in the country, and basically every spot on the field, they've got their top guys back. There's some turnover, like a wide receiver, but they've got really good defensive linemen. I mean, basically all three levels of the defense are going to be solid. I think they got a couple of their best offensive linemen back. They got the quarterback, they got the running back. They're going to be in good shape. Like, that's going to be a big test for State early in the season. And then having to go to Columbia right after that, and how important that game is. I mean, those two games right there probably determine your season. You could easily talk about State being a much, much, much better team and the win total not improving from where it did a year ago. Now, I'm not saying that to excuse Levy. Like, we're at a point he's got to get to a bowl game. It is what it is. But it could be a situation where State is genuinely a much better team this year and still has to fight to get to 6-6. But that's the expectation, and you got to find a way to deliver.
I mean, on the other hand, last year we had a chance to win 3 more games. We didn't have the chance. We had to win these 3 games: Tennessee, Texas, Florida. All 3 games. We gave it away. Texas didn't win. We lost the game. Tennessee didn't win the game. We lost it. Florida, I don't talk about this Florida game. This was. I couldn't believe what I saw. I mean, we have a top 3 kicker in all of NCAA, and he wins us the game from 44 yards. He's automatic from 48. Automatic. Absolute. He missed 3 attempts last year, or 4. I mean, and we could go 8-5, and nobody would talk about, this team is bad and this, but we have to finish the games. And the problem I have is Camario Taylor may be a better quarterback in the long run as Blake Shapen. But Shapen had the experience. You know, he saw everything. And Camario didn't play against Alabama or a Georgia or a Tennessee or something like that. He saw Ole Miss. So, but I hope we get it done. I really hope. I mean,
yeah.
And to baseball, we have to sweep Tennessee. I couldn't believe what I saw last weekend. We got swept by Georgia, by UGA in baseball. It's unbelievable. But the defending champion LSU lost midweeks to Bethune-Cookman.
They did.
From the SWAC. But Bethune is a good team. Anyway, Andrew, I leave you alone. I go back in the comment section for half an hour, and then I go to sleep.
We appreciate having you here, Sven. Thanks again.
Okay, I kick me out myself.
All right. We have Bobby Anthony here. How's it going?
Hey, man, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Dude, I've been a huge fan since the Maroon Mike. I'm glad, to see you still progressing. You're one of the true dogs who keep it real, my man. There's a lot to talk about. The first thing would probably be, I think you already touched on it, though, and I know this is a football deal, but, in baseball, man, it's like you get some of those teams who can definitely do what they need to do against medium to lesser competition, but I mean, 1-7 against, the best. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like,
right.
and it's so there's a little bit of that, but I mean, we do have the best coach in baseball that we've had in a long time.
Totally agree.
We finally put our foot down. So I guess there's 2 things, and then I'll, just let you. I'd like to touch on what you think about us being elite in baseball, and then the second one would be, because we were able, Selman, we were able to get that elite because Mississippi State, you put them in soccer, you put them in women's basketball, the fans are going to show up.
Yeah,
and we have that opportunity to be elite in any of the. Honestly, Ole Miss is kind of unfortunately showing us the blueprint a little bit of like it, but I believe we have better fans. So my point is like, why do we sit around when we know we can get, an elite baseball coach? We can, elevate our level in every area of Bulldog athletics. And then what do you think about the baseball team? My bad. I'll let you go ahead and speak.
No, you're good. You're good. Appreciate the call. No.
Yeah, man.
And also thanks for the kind words. Appreciate that as well. Glad you've been listening for a long time.
Absolutely.
So for the baseball thing first for this team, like, yeah, they can absolutely be an elite team. And I've said this before. I'm not a baseball savant by any means. I can just kind of give you my thoughts as a fan, like everybody else. But I'm not worried about the lineup. I know they didn't do a ton at UAB the other night either, but I'm going to trust the overall body of work. They've got dudes who are fantastic up and down the lineup. Like, that's going to get figured out. I think this is just a couple bad games.
But doesn't bullpen win games? Like, isn't that kind of like the defense?
I was going to get there.
Yeah. Okay, my bad. Yeah,
I got you. So starting pitching. Like, I think once they're healthy, once you get McPherson back, I think you're perfectly fine there. And
right.
I'm glad they moved Valinkas to Friday night. I think you had to do that. I understand, kind of what they were. One, keeping guys on the schedule that they were on to keep it a week between, but two, trying to have. I guess there's a thought process of Valinkas is essentially a Friday night guy. We trust our lineup enough, even going up against an opponent's Friday night player, that if we can throw Charlie Foster right now, like we still think our bats can go and do enough to give us a chance to win those games.
Sure.
And then we have a massive edge Saturday, Sunday with Valinkas, Duke, Stone. If you got to give yourself the best chance you can to start off 1-0 in a series. So making that move, which I guess now it's on a week because you played him on a Friday last week. So I'm glad they made that move. And if you get McPherson back, it's near not talking about having being elite. And Sven let us know Foster beat Hunter Elliott. Yeah, Foster did actually have a really good outing against Ole Miss.
Well, if I can clarify, it's not that I don't think that we could have three of the best starters in America, especially if they get better. It's just like the back end. It's like who is going to finish the game? You know what I mean? Like when you get into those we looked at it in football, yada yada yada, but it's like, who's going to make that play? Who's going to throw that? You know what I'm saying? Like, how can you close the game? I mean, we what was 5-5 going into the 10th? You're just kind of like, can we close it? This is an elite, this is another elite team. Like, can we close the game? It's kind of like that,
They definitely have to get things a little bit figured out on the back end for sure. And look, Dane Burns has given you good innings this year. I think Tyler Pitzer has shown some things. Maddox Webb has had some good moments for you. Like, you've got guys who have thrown good innings for sure. They've gone to Ben Davis a lot, and I think did he have the terrible outing this past weekend when he came? I'm blanking on who that was that got put in, and it didn't go very well. But I think
it wasn't terrible. It's just it's just about locking it down, kind of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, my thing with the bullpen, what I've got to say, it's a lot of guys who are inexperienced, but incredibly talented.
For sure.
And what you are hoping is by having to play these guys, especially right now in this current stretch where, because you got Foster as one of your starters, you automatically are facing a situation where you're going to have to go deeper into your pen on weekends than you typically would if you had McPherson out there. You're getting guys a lot of those innings and getting them through. And yeah, sometimes it's going poorly, but you're also seeing, a few people have brought up Jack Bauer, and Maddox Miller, Jack Bauer making great progress.
I think that's kind of like the Camario Taylor of this season. You don't play him the whole year. Is he too young? Is he too young? Is he too young? And then he may come in at the end and be what you need. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
So what you're hoping is that those guys continue to click as the season goes along and get better and better. And then by the time you hit the postseason, you've got the best version of your pitching staff that you've seen. And, I know that's been kind of a conversation with Brian O'Connor and some of the changes they've made, I think it's primarily been people upset. Like, why is a guy throws a one inning that's great and then you go and make a change? Like, why not leave him in there? And there's been a few guys who've been left in too long. That's a whole big thing, which I guess that's also a Justin Parker thing. But I don't.
that is a Justin Parker thing. Yeah,
I don't mind as big picture. If you're talking about like trying to get these guys as many reps as possible,
right?
Gearing up,
right?
Okay, like not to say that this is going to be what 2021 was in terms of like what that pitching staff became, but like remember they threw a ton. Like there were a ton of games that season where you had a starter doing fantastic and they would make a change, or a bullpen guy would come in and only throw a handful of pitches before making a change despite pitching well. It's like, why are you doing this? It's like, well, because we have incredible depth. And what it did was by the time the postseason came around, they were ready to go as much as
exactly
they had to.
Like Bednar won it freshman.
Yes.
Exactly.
And Landon Sims being able to throw a ton of innings
right
in that postseason. I'm not sitting here saying like this is not the same pitching staff. Maybe it could develop into that. And nor am I saying that they're going to end up being a national championship type team. Like, and clearly, like that year, they were a little bit better off in that they were the talent in that room was strong enough for them to mostly win a lot of the games they had, and the bullpen stepped up pretty well. I think this year you've had more struggles, although you also have a lineup this year that hits a little bit better than you did back then. So that kind of picks up the difference a little bit for you. It's kind of the same philosophy, though. And that's where I think if you're talking Mississippi State breaking through, and I talked about it earlier in the week after Georgia, like it's fair. I don't like – this is where, like, again, my football brain comes in.
Right.
I don't like this whole thing of we can't possibly suggest there might be things that this team needs to be better at just because, well, it's baseball and things get figured out. Like, no, if it's going poor, and I know it's one weekend of it going poor, but we can at this point say, like, hey, against the very best teams, they've not quite been there yet. They've got
right.
to improve upon, and that's where it's – 1-7 against the top 10, 1-5 against teams currently ranked in the top 10. But I still think the fact they've been competitive in every single one of those games, the fact most of the issues have been things that can get cleaned up, the ceiling is there for this to be the national championship type contender that everybody has hoped and expected them to be. They've got to get things figured out. But to use the baseball adage of getting hot at the right time, if you want to have a positive spin, you'd say, look, this team is winning games, but still has a lot of things to get figured out. If they get them figured out going into, the back half of May or whatever, you're going to be in great shape.
Right. Absolutely. I think that was pretty spot on. And that's really all you can look forward to is just like, can they get better at developing? Exactly. The second half of my question, and maybe a little off topic, but like, been a huge women's basketball fan for a while, and it's just the fact that I know everyone likes to give. I mean, look, no diss to Sam Purcell. It wasn't the greatest situation, but I mean, are we really just going to allow ourselves to have these last season slides? It's like, look, I'm trying to not be negative because I know that in Mississippi State fandom, you can't be too positive, you can't be too negative. But I know we're better than that. Like, I know we can, and it's like, well, where do you put the NIL? I get that, but it's like fans will come to look at softball, look at women's soccer, it's like you put a good product on it's like, and so, I mean, what did he say? I took this job because I know it's the best, blah, 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 in the country. It's like, well, then come on now, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, Selman kind of set the bar with saying, hey, we're not going to put up this with O'Connor. So why can't we go out there and kind of be a mini – I'm not saying we're going to be LSU and go out and just get every single – but I mean, our fans kind of deserve that. What do you think about that? And then I'll probably hang up and listen, but I appreciate it, man, because I think that I guess in the core it's like I know we deserve better in all these other areas. We give a lot of grace. We give a lot of grace in these sports. Yeah. We do, but anyway, I appreciate you, brother. So, yeah.
Yeah, man.
I guess I'll hang up and listen to that, but I'd love to hear what you got to say. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, really appreciate the questions. Thanks for joining in.
Cool.
So as for the Purcell part of it, you mentioned the NIL thing, and I have suspected, there was thought when all the baseball stuff happened, the national conversation was, well, Mississippi State clearly is saying we know we can't win in baseball, we know we can't win in football. No, we can't win in men's basketball. We are going all in on baseball, and like clearly, State's going to be wasting all their NIL, all their rev share on a sport that only they and a couple other teams care about. I don't. And has been said repeatedly is no, like this is new money. This is not money going away from football. Like this is money being pumped into the programs for baseball. And I do agree, I believe everyone who has to say that. I do have to think if there is some level of funding that previously would have gone to a sport that is now, or not previously would have gone to sport, but maybe like from an NIL rev share, like what piece of the pie, how are we divvying this up? I think baseball probably did get a little bit of a bigger piece of the pie than what they had previously. And I think the fact that you saw so many of those key players from last year's women's basketball team hit the portal, and I think Robbie Falk reported, and if Robbie did not say this, I don't mean to put it on him. I feel like I remember him talking about some of those players leaving for NIL reasons. If that's not the case, again, I'm not trying to misattribute that to him. I think that's what he had talked about. And he's more locked into women's basketball than anybody else who covers MSU. And it's like, okay, is this a thing that they're maybe not spending the same on women's basketball that maybe they previously would have? Or even if I say previously would have, let's be honest, what was the money in women's basketball in the years leading up to it? I could see it being more of a case of like, okay, now we have to spend money on these sports and we got to pick and choose who's getting it. And it's not that women's basketball is getting less of a cut. It's that we're just choosing the money to go elsewhere. And again, I don't know any of State's financials. This is all just me guessing. This is me making assumptions. Does that mean I'm making a you-know-what of myself? Probably. And I have to hesitate on this because people get very upset if you suggest you know anything from an NIL standpoint, and it's not the case. Ballard in the chat. What's going on? Glad to see you. I do wonder if State is investing in women's basketball in the way that they previously would have, or the way that they would have continued if you had a coach like Vic Schaefer. I don't think that's why Vic left. I think there were other things that have been talked about, and I'm certainly not getting into all that. Although funding may have been some of it, to be honest. I just know there's the other thing people mostly talk about. Look, maybe it's a different situation than if you still have a coach like Vic in charge, but I think almost every school has to pick and choose. And this is being realistic. I think unless you are the Texases, LSUs, I would say Alabama, but frankly, there's a lot of people pointing out Bama's not spending the way that you would expect, even for like the Ohio States, the schools that genuinely have unlimited money. And whether, people talk about rev share, people talk about NIL caps, whatever, those schools always find a way to make it happen. If you're not one of them, you kind of have to pick and choose where the investment goes. And I don't think that means you have to sacrifice football and men's basketball as like the top two revenue sports. I think it's the third sport that kind of becomes the big conversation at a lot of SEC programs. I think it's the third sport where the conversation really comes up. Like, what are you investing in sport number 3 on what you're choosing it for it to be? And I know I'm not talking about MSU. I'm aware baseball for some is number 1, but I mean, in the sense of you have your 2 revenue sports where you really don't have, unless you're just going to say, screw it, we don't care. You basically have no choice but to invest heavily in those 2. And then I think you have a third. It's like, okay, what do we go in? Clearly Mississippi State with baseball. This is me guessing. Again, I continue to reiterate that. So I think some of it is just that like State choosing where money's going to go. And like I look at softball, and like softball's had no issue continuing to get players. That's because I think that's a sport where NIL still really isn't much of a thing. Unless you're, I'm blanking on. I know the first name's Nadia. I'm blanking on the last name. The insane pitcher who went from Stanford to Texas Tech and made like over $1 million, and that was reported. And that's Texas Tech with all the money in the world, and Cody Campbell running that thing. That's like the lone example. Pretty much everybody else in softball, I'd imagine, is not getting much. Frankly, most everybody in baseball is not getting much. But MSU clearly is in that tier of we're going to make sure we're doing everything possible to make that happen. So I think that's part of it, like where this all starts. Now, as for Purcell, it's that he's had players good enough to be better than they've been. They've had enough talent to win more games than they have. There's been no reason over the past 3 years to have some of the struggles they've had down the stretch. I guess I'm trying to remember 2 seasons ago when they made the tournament, if they had a late season slide. But 2 of the last 3 years, you've had rosters in place, rosters that were I know 3 years ago, that portal class that came in, the team that beat LSU and then lost like their last 5 games, that was a portal class that was like one of the top in the country. Like people who cover women's basketball at a national scale were like, look at the job Sam Purcell is doing in the portal. And then that team fell apart. And I know there's been my former co-host, Colton Watson from the Maroon Mike. He's also pretty close to women's basketball. I think he's heard some things that from a locker room standpoint, they weren't where they need to be, which apparently had been an issue for multiple seasons over various different teams, but whatever. That team had more than enough talent to be a tournament team. There's no reason for them to have collapsed the way they did. And as the head coach in Purcell, you got to figure that out. This season, I'll admit I was not blown away by the portal class that Purcell brought in, but when you look at the pieces he brought in from the high school class, and then he did hit on the new additions they had out of the portal overall, he had another team good enough to be a tournament team, and they lost games they didn't need to. And it's clear, like that's the thing that's frustrating. We can talk about NIL, we can talk about committing, whatever. If it's clear you've got players in your team good enough to win more than you've been winning, that's a frustrating spot to be in. And that's an indictment. As for why State's not going to go and make the change, I mean, I don't know. It's a question, I think, of fighting perception. It's also a question of whether or not, look, is the money actually going to be invested necessary? Because we can say all this, like, I know it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here, where the roster's been good enough to win more games, but I think if you're trying to get a new coach and new staff to want to come and be a part of this, they're going to want to see more money up front than maybe whatever it is you're investing. It feels like sometimes the expectation of financial commitment does not always meet up with what is actually needed to be successful. But the coaches are always convinced we need more, we need more, we need more. And I guess their logic is, well, you can't leave it on me to make it work with just these players, even though these players are good enough. So we got to talk about the Chris Jans. Like, Mississippi State has done enough. Like, the players State men's basketball has gone out and landed are players that they should have been better with. Like, there's guys you had to go win NIL battles to bring in and just didn't pan out. That's a result of poor evaluation on Jans's part when it's all said and done. The evaluation has been there for Purcell. It's getting the most out of the group. They've got to be a tournament team next year. But I also think you're not wrong with the question of, like, State fans are going to want more and support. I also think it's probably easy for a lot of people to say, look, as long as it – kind of the same way I think Ole Miss is talking about baseball right now, to use the Ole Miss comparison, where Ole Miss baseball is sort of just doing barely just enough consistently under Bianco for them to keep rolling with Bianco and just keep that program the way it is, despite a lot of their fans being sick of it. Until you get a point where people have to be furious with the product, if it's just an okay product, that'll probably do well for a lot of people, to be honest. If it's not football, and in Mississippi State's case, baseball would be the other one. I think men's basketball is a sport at State. I say this is a guy who loves MSU men's basketball a ton. I think a lot of the fan base, as long as it's just solid, you probably can stick with it for quite some time until it reaches a point, like until it gets fully stale. Like, you got to do more than like Howland was doing at the end of his tenure. But you can probably stick with it for a few years of just being a 20-ish win type team. Go to the tournament every couple of years, go to the NIT in between, and you're probably okay. Like I said, I know it happened. You got to a point with Ben Howland where it wasn't enough. But I don't think it's the same way. Like, the pressure – Stansbury got fired because the results weren't enough. I don't think the pressure is the same that it was then. I don't think it's the same pressure then. And I think, frankly, the success of football since that point has probably played a role in that, to be honest. I wonder what the selling point would be for a lot of the other coaches. Now, as for why we were able to do it in baseball, you can sell the program really well, and they got the money brought up for it. It's a tough conversation, and I'll be like, I don't have every answer at all. I just think trying to go out and make a marquee hire at Mississippi State in a sport that is not baseball is always going to be some level of challenging because you're fighting perception. And I know this is a program that hired Mike Leach. What I will always point out with Leach is that is as unique a situation as you could possibly get because you had a coach who very much wanted to go coach in the SEC, had been trying to leave Washington State for several seasons leading up to that. And the SEC was a landing spot that he wanted to go to, who, despite being an all-time great coach and having a resume worthy of going up and coaching at a top 15 type program and having a job like that, like the level Leach won at Tech and Wazoo over the sustained period he did, almost any other coach eventually would have gotten an opportunity to coach at a bigger program than that, and a top-tier program in college football. But Leach, being Leach, led to a lot of programs saying no because they don't want to see that offense. They also kind of want a coach who is more coach-like than Mike Leach is. And all the fun things we enjoy about Leach, there's a lot of programs at the top of college football that aren't like that. I say all that to say Mississippi State was the exact type of job that's like, dude, we'll bring you on. And it's a job that, like, look, State compared to his upgrade over a handful of power conference jobs in college football, it's a pretty significant upgrade over Washington State. Pretty significant upgrade over Washington State. So that it was an easy selling point for a coach like Mike Leach. I think baseball is the one sport where clearly you've always had the ability to go out and make a marquee move, and they finally just pushed all their chips in to make it happen. I just think it's tougher in some of the other sports to do that. You're looking for an up-and-comer. And look, we had a question earlier, if Lebby doesn't turn around, small list the type of coaches you need. State deserves good leadership. I've talked about for football, I mean, if Lebby does not work, and I'm not predicting one way or another right here, right now, if it doesn't work, I do think you need to go for a sitting head coach. I go back and forth on that at the times because I feel like trying to limit your candidate pool and missing out on the guy who might be the next fantastic coach just because, well, he hasn't done it before is foolish. But I think Mississippi State having a guy that has shown they know how to win is very important. I think it's also important you find a guy who has been successful at a program that doesn't have the same advantages. And I know people don't like hearing the whole poor old thing, and people get mad if you talk about like Mississippi State being a place where you got to do things differently, whatever. And I'm not talking about hiring a coach who runs a specific system. It's not necessarily about that. I always think, though, you have to understand, like, where has your program traditionally been within your conference? This is my hiring process for any job nationally in any sport. What is your history? What are your resources? And what do you have? How do you stack up relative to your conference? The teams that you have to play every single year. How do you stack up relative to the rest of that league in terms of what resources you have available to you? And then you need to go find a coach who is good at maximizing that within the league that they've been at. One of the big criticisms I had with Arkansas in hiring Ryan Silverfield is that Ryan Silverfield, who I think is a fine football coach, was at a program in Memphis that, while yes, if you go 15 years ago, was as bad as any program in the country, but post Justin Fuente building that thing up, emerged as a top-tier Group of Five program that has far more money and backing into it than a lot of other G5 teams, specifically within the American Conference. They were the top-tier program in that league in terms of the money that they were able to spend on a roster because of the FedEx money they had and what they could do from a recruiting standpoint that a lot of other teams in the American could not do. So you had a massive advantage. He took over a program that was rolling. They immediately got worse after he took over. It took him several years to get it back to being at a good level. It's not a coincidence, though. They didn't start winning again until teams like Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF left for the Big 12. Once that happened, suddenly Memphis was able to be a double-digit win team again, while having a massive advantage over everybody else in the league. Now that guy's going to an Arkansas program that does not have that advantage over the rest of the SEC. It has been talked about repeatedly. Arkansas has not spent on football the way that they need to for what their expectations are. Like, even though they've got the Tyson and the Walmart money, like, that money has not gone into football previously to build out that roster the way it needs to be competitive. I think I have heard State has absolutely been spending more on football from a roster standpoint than Arkansas has the last couple of years. So you have a program in Arkansas that's right at the bottom of the league in terms of investment. You were a coach that underachieved at a program while having better investment than everybody else. How are we expecting you to go and be successful? So I think if you're Mississippi State, you have to figure – and look, if State continues to build this thing up, it's been talked about, you had $30 million for the roster this year. $30 million is enough to go out and build a really good team. Yeah, 40 is being spent at LSU and maybe, places like Texas Tech. But if you're spending close to $30 million, yeah, you can field a good roster, which puts more pressure on Lebby this year. And if you feel that money is good enough right there to put you in a tier where you can compete at a high level, then, okay, find coaches who you think can do that. But you better find guys who you trust to maximize that. So that's the big thing I would always look to. Guys who have proven that they can be successful with similar resources to what you have relative to the places they've been coaching. I don't think you get hung up on, well, has he been in the South before? What has he been as a recruiter? I don't even think you get hung up so much stylistically on what they've done. You look at the results and you buy in on maximizing that. A question from Trey Clark here. If Leach hadn't passed, we would have been able to maintain 7-5, 8-4. Yes. Look, I don't know that Leach would have. I don't know that Leach would have had State jumping up to being a 9+ win team regularly. I'm not going to argue, even as a guy who's a massive fan of him and defended a lot of what he was doing at a time when State fans were getting frustrated with it. I don't think Leach would have gotten to a point of being 9-10 wins with any sort of regularity, which I think there probably would have been pressure to achieve given what Kiffin was doing at Ole Miss. I mean, let's just be honest. You're going to make those comparisons. But do I think Mississippi State football over the past 4 years, or 3 years rather, would have been a consistently solid team? Yes. They would have been an 8-9 win team in 2023. I think go back to 2024 would have been probably been a bowl type team that year because that was going to be a roster reset year regardless. And then I think this past year you're probably talking about a team that could have gone 8+ wins or so. You would have been a consistently solid program that then had everything click together. You're talking about jumping up and having the big type year. Did want to go back, and Trey had another thing pointed out because this was way back in the show. We were talking about the defense. I realized I still have to get to all the things that we're watching for in the spring game. He talked about confidence in the defense being better this year, and that's the scheme made the linebacker better than they were. Jet was good, but not overly talented. And this was in response. Sven had pointed out the talent at linebacker State had on that 2023 defense and how that kind of elevated despite some of the things lacking around them. I think scheme is a big part of it. Like Jet, for as good of a player as he was not a special athlete. Like playing in Zach Arnett's defense was huge for him. Now Buki was pretty freaking athletic, but I think you have better athletes in this room top to bottom. So I think State's linebackers are going to thrive playing for Zach Arnett and with Matt Brock coaching them. Also, you have Jet there in the room. Hey, I've played in this defense. I can show you what it's like to go and make 120 tackles playing in this thing. This is how you do it. And go Jet had like 14.5 tackles for losses last season. So that helps. Trey also pointed out Will Whitson played the 5 technique that will play the 5 technique that Crumedy played a lot. It does sound like Whitson's going to be kind of that true 5-tech, 4-eye defensive end type guy. So not a guy that's like a classic edge rusher, but a bigger body guy that you can put shade to the inside. Crumedy did a little bit more 3-tech type stuff, I think. They may have even put him at the nose on occasion, but Crumedy was a guy that they would kick outside or kick to that 5 technique on defense to play more of as a defensive end. And I think Whitson kind of fits that same mold. I think he's going to be your starting defensive end. I would expect if I were to nail it right now, starting defensive end, Will Whitson, starting nose tackle, Dalen Evans, starting defensive tackle, I was going to say Bledsoe, and then edge, Sam linebacker, Amari Williams would be kind of my guess. That first 4 across, something along those lines. I thought we'd do a little bit of baseball stuff tonight, but we're running long. But I enjoy that. We went long because we had multiple calls, had a lot of questions. I love that stuff. It's great to have. It's relevant. I did have a friend ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad will the O-line be since we put all our eggs into a basket of a long shot and guy fighting for a last year of eligibility? He's talking about Brandon Stay. I'm going to withhold a lot of my opinions on offensive line until the reports come out from how the spring scrimmage goes. If we're going to do a scale 1 to 10, put it blankly at a 5. It's right there in the middle. That I think there's still massive questions, but there's also been enough suggesting that they could get a little bit better. And I've talked about the talent in the room is better. That is one thing, and I know I hit on this a few weeks back, that for as much criticism as there has been on this offensive line class coming in and not having proven names, it's more talented than what they had before. Now, offensive line, as I have harped on, talent is not a be-all, end-all. That experience and reps and continuity, all that stuff matters a ton. But if you got guys who are pretty talented and a few of them break out, you could take a nice step forward. So the ceiling is there in the room, and the ceiling is higher than what they've had previously. Real quick, do want to take a second to tell you guys about the great merch we have with the Voice of College Football. Have a lot of teams represented. If you want team-specific merch, no Mississippi State gear just yet. Hopefully we get there, but a lot of other SEC teams represented. So if you have any friends from those other programs, you can find gear for them. But we have great hats, T-shirts. It's the one that's got that maroon color. Polos, different drink gear with mugs, cooler, koozies, and a tumbler. A lot of great stuff. If you want to rep the Voice of College Football brand, while also repping your team and your team colors, you can do that as well. Check that out at the Voice of College Football shop. Get the camera back. All right. We got a little bit more to go. I just spit water. That's great. That's great for the stream. So, State's got the spring scrimmage this weekend. And look, not a traditional spring game, but you're going to get X number of snaps of different units going up against each other. And it's going to be the first time that that's publicly available. And, unfortunately not televised. As I mentioned earlier, I will not be in attendance. And therefore, I will not get to see any of this unless any of it gets posted online. People taking videos who are in attendance at Davis Wade Stadium. But I'm going to be going off whatever is reported coming out of this. I'm sure there will be some big takeaways from all the various MSU beat reporters and insiders out there talking about what we saw in the State's spring scrimmage. What are we hoping we learn from it? What are the things we're looking for? And I've got several big things that I'm curious about. And right off the bat, we'll start with the one we've already talked about a ton, and that is the offensive line. Simply put, who are the dudes and how do they perform? What does that top 5 look like? Lebby said that he thinks right now they feel pretty good about a top 5. I believe Blake Steen is still banged up, so that might be a question as to whether or not you're going to see him in action. And, if you have a top 5 that goes out there without Blake Steen that still performs really well, suddenly that's a little bit more confidence because that's a guy in Steen that has played a lot of college football, has started a lot of games at both mostly at right tackle, but has played a little bit guard as well. If you're saying that's a guy that it could be a 6th lineman for you, that's a really good spot to be in, to be completely honest. So very curious about the group that they have running out there. Obviously, Cannon Boone's going to be at center. TJ Chester, I would expect. I think Miles McVay, it sounds like, has been one of the top guys at left tackle for them. So, how is he performing? That's going to be a big thing to watch. Do any of the younger guys, how are they factoring into this room? I think Jakeem Shumpert-Perkins is someone that Lebby has shouted out a little bit as the JUCO transfer coming off his redshirt year. O-line is what everybody's looking for. You don't need him to be dominant. Can they consistently get it blocked up well enough to let your backs make plays or Camario make plays and just give Camario enough of a pocket? That's what you're looking for. Are you getting the push you need to see up front? Are you not letting free rushers through every single play. You're not getting whipped off the edge, as so often happened last season with the tackles you had. That's what you're watching more than anything else. Second thing I'm watching on offense is Camario's command. Year 2 for Camario Taylor in this offense. Obviously showed all the flashes in the world last year, going back to this time a season ago in the spring when he was the superstar of MSU's spring game back in 2025. What's step number 2 for him? How much more comfortable does he look running the offense? We know that he is capable of, being an incredible athlete and just making plays. He can execute the run game stuff that you're going to ask him with the quarterback and the option reads. He can throw the deep ball downfield. We've seen him do some of the, being able to hit guys in stride on those when he's able to throw in rhythm on those quick hitters across the middle. But when you start talking about getting more into the drop back game, which they don't do a ton of in this offense, but when you get into those looks or some of the quick stuff that you're going to throw to your receivers and your tight ends, just how comfortable does he look executing the offense? Does he look like a guy that's been in this system for a long time and is just able to kind of go out there and mechanically work through everything? What I've always said with Levy quarterbacks is the guys that have impressed me the most that Levy has coached are the guys that you feel like watching them run the offense, that they just understand each play, that they look like a robot out there. And you don't want that entirely because you want a guy who can do things when it breaks down, which obviously Camario can. But I go back, Matt Corral at Ole Miss, I loved watching him execute this offense because I felt like he simply understood play by play. This is my role. This is what I need to do. This is how I execute it. And it was a very repeatable, mechanical operation. I wanted to see that out of Camario. And after another offseason, and with him being the guy getting all the number 1 reps, that's a big thing to watch for. What are we hearing about State's number 2 running back? That's a big question mark. You've got Fluff Bothwell coming back as your lead guy in the room. He is the dude. What do you have after that? It kind of sounds like Colin Wilson is stealing the show. Levy was very complimentary of him, that he's a guy that's very explosive, a guy that's done a great job making plays when it feels like he's dead to rights, and that he has taken a big step forward. That'd be big. Xavier Gaden, there were some questions last year. Last year was Xavier Gaden's opportunity to say, yeah, man, I'm the next really good running back at Mississippi State. He didn't fully seize that. He still has a lot of athleticism, a lot of talent, can be that type of guy, but we haven't quite seen it just yet with any consistency. So do you get that with Colin Wilson? And obviously people want to see the young guys in that room as well. But I've got more on that in a bit. But number 2 back, I'm hoping to hear that you've got another guy after Fluff that looks really impressive in that room. Which wide receiver steps up? I'm hoping to hear about a big day from a receiver not named Anthony Evans. And obviously Ant is going to be the go-to guy. There's no doubt about that. Anthony Evans will lead this team in receiving, at least in receptions, probably in yards too, if I had to guess. But you're losing a 1,000-yard receiver in Brennan Thompson. You don't have it settled at the other outside receiver spot either because, Aiden Williams coming back. And Aiden showed a few nice things last season, but Aiden also didn't look like a go-to guy receiver. So that's a spot where it's kind of opened up as well. You're bringing in Marquise Johnson as another burner-type deep threat. You have Frisco McGee, who is like the media team's favorite guy on the planet because every other week they're able to put together a highlight reel catch of him. You've got Grayson Harris's name has come up quite a bit. Obviously, he's more of a slot guy. Any of the – I think, Keemian Henderson's the only young receiver that's going to be there. But Bull Mitchell is someone that there's been some talk about coming out of camp that has looked pretty solid for them. And look, there's Aiden Williams as well. And Aiden Williams last year was the star of the spring game. Had some big receptions in that game, made people really excited about what he was going to be. And he didn't fully get those big plays this past season. Do you have a guy that clearly looks like a go-to threat down the field who can take over one of those outside receiver spots? That's a big thing I'm watching for with this Bulldog offense. Over on the other side of the ball, what are we hearing about the defense from a stylistic standpoint? Every report coming out of practice, when they talk to the guys on defense, is this idea of playing loose, playing free, and being attacking and being aggressive. That this defense just lets us fly after the football. And we're going to go after teams. We're going to be this team that is constantly putting forth the pressure on our opponents. And I feel like some of the guys on offense have voiced similar takeaways. Obviously, them going up against it. How aggressive does Zach Arnett make this thing? Are they going to sit back and just play kind of base, coverages and not send a bunch of pressure, or are they trying to dial it up? I hope they dial it up. I hope we're hearing that this defense is attacking all throughout the spring game because, one, you're helping fans get excited that the defense can do it. Two, you're testing your offense a little bit, and I want to see how they handle it. I want to see how that offensive line handles a defense that's throwing a lot of different pressure looks at them. And obviously, I want to see the guys on defense who's making the plays there. So, and how well can they execute in those spots? Because we know Zach Arnett come season time, that's what he's going to be calling, whether they execute it or not. So we want to see that stylistically. And kind of off of that, up front, who are the dudes that are making plays, if anybody? Is, and Will Whitson, I don't know if he's fully back just yet, what the situation is there. But, Dalen Evans, can he be a force up front? Gus Cordova is a guy as a transfer in that there's a lot of hype around because of the potential. Amari Williams at that edge spot. Sounds like there's a lot of eggs in the Amari Williams basket that this is going to be the dude. How does he go out and perform? Is he getting pressure continually? The linebackers factor into this as well. We're seeing them playing within this defense and how aggressive can a Ty Lockhart, Sakari Tillman, how successful can they look? My guy, Jere Bledsoe, that I'm a mark for. Do we get dominant Jere Bledsoe making plays? These are all the things that people are going to be looking for. Trevion Williams' name has come up a lot. Bam Bam has been kind of the talk coming out of practice that he's performed well. So what are you getting there? Do you see guys in that defensive front consistently getting in the backfield, making plays, being disruptive? Obviously with a balance because you want the offensive line to perform well too. But who are the guys that you're looking at on defense that you're saying, all right, that guy's a difference maker along that defensive front? Because if you got a couple of those guys, that goes a long, long way. Number 2 corner. We know you got Kelly logging down one side of the field. I think there's going to be great competition. That feels like a Levyism right now. We have great competition in the room. The other side of the field. We talked about cornerbacks earlier in the week, and the talent level is undoubtedly a lot higher. And I think Quentin Taylor might be battling some injury type stuff. I think. But we've heard about Caleb Singleton, Jet Jefferson, Jamrock Grimsley in the room as a guy that hopefully, fully healthy could break through. Kyle Johnson, what type of role can he play? It's a wide open battle with some really talented players. Do you have a guy on the other side that is consistently challenging State's receivers? Because, I want State's receivers to make plays downfield, but I want to see a battle. I want to see back and forth. I want to see tight coverage. So number 2 corner is definitely something to be watching very closely. And lastly, and this is big picture for the whole team, what are the young guys that stand out, if any? Micah Nickerson, man. Can Micah Nickerson be the guy that gives State that spark off the edge they so desperately need and be that true pass rusher that's consistently standing out? J.J. Hill and Cooper Crosby at running back. Are either of them going to make those plays and make you say, all right, hold up, they can get involved? I mentioned Keemian Henderson as a receiver and, the only one to enroll early. So he could get a leg up on some of those other guys. Zayon Cotton. Sam West apparently has been performing really well at tight end, but I know Cotton's the guy people are really excited about because of the athletic potential. How does he perform? Braylon Womack. I would have been crazy if I'd gone through this and not mentioned his name at least once. You've got basically a 5-star safety in the back of the room that apparently has been making some plays and has looked impressive. What type of an impact does he make? And look, you take all of it with somewhat of a grain of salt. I say that we're going to overreact big time, I'm sure, come Monday. But you understand that having a big spring game performance does not necessarily correlate to being a guy. And it's not even a real spring game this time around, right? It's a scrimmage. You're running a handful of plays, different situations, probably some different drills, I would guess. How does that correlate? It does and it doesn't. But you want to see these standout performances across the board and in order to generate some excitement. So those are the big things I want to be watching for or what I'm hoping to learn come out of State's spring scrimmage. It's going to be important in terms of getting people really locked in for this team going into 2026. Fun show. Honestly, I'm going to be completely honest. When I sat down, I was thinking, all right, I'm just going to get on here and ramble about the Masters for quite some time. We'll talk the Tennessee series a little bit, and then I'll go through my topics. But a couple calls, a lot really active chat. I really love that. I appreciate it. Everyone for getting involved. And yeah, fun conversations. This is what I want Thursday nights to be. And that's not me like, I need it to be like this. No, I just mean the Thursday night show is one where I want it to be as viewer driven, as listener driven as possible. And to be fair, Mondays can be that way as well. Like Mondays, obviously, we could get great conversation going in the chat also. But Thursdays especially, this is one where it's an opportunity for us to just get together and talk about Mississippi State sports, which is a really fun time to have. So that's why I wanted to have this show be something we do, and we'll definitely keep it going. So, for this show, we'll be back this time next week, 7 p.m. next Thursday. I don't know. Does State have what's State's schedule? Let me talk baseball, whether or not to plan on a Thursday or not next week. I hope they're not, because that makes things annoying. Oh, no, it's okay. Friday, Saturday, Sunday against South Carolina. We're fine. So, yeah, next Thursday night, another call-in show, another Q&A. I'll put out a call for questions once again if you guys have any. Did I even answer? Sven asked me my take on Arnett's defense so far. Let me hit that real quick, because I think Sven's gone at this point because over in I believe he's in Germany. He's got to get to sleep. But I kind of talked to, like, all the reports have been a very aggressive group, right? And that they're making a lot of plays. So we're going to learn a lot on Saturday about how that group is progressing. But yeah, we'll have another call-in show next Thursday. I'll be back Monday. We will talk about what we've learned from state spring scrimmages, what is reported, what are the players that stood out, what are continued areas of concern, what are areas we feel better about, optimistic. Whatever we can learn from state spring scrimmage, we're going to talk about that on Monday. We'll talk about whatever happened on the diamond as well. I'm going to tell y'all right now, though, with the Masters, it'd probably be tough for me to get fully locked in on what's happening for baseball. What's the schedule for this weekend, like game time wise? Okay, like Friday night and Saturday night. Like, yeah, that's fine. Like I can have those. Sunday 1 p.m. That's like when the leaders are teeing off. So I don't know if I'm going to have much to say about Sunday's game. But excuse me. See, I go talking for an hour, 12 minutes, and I start coughing. That's when I got to have some sort of a drink handy with me. It's great to have. Fun show tonight. Like I said, we'll be back next Monday. Appreciate everybody who was here. If you haven't already, please leave us a like. Subscribe to the channel and have those notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. And as always, swing your sword, Hail State. And I was going to do some sort of a Masters outro, but I'm just hoping for an incredible rest of the tournament. See y'all later.
Hey, y'all. This is Grant Sassery of LSU at the Voice of College Football Network. I'm here today to announce that the Voice of College Football Network now has its official website. It's been uploaded so you can look at all the latest news and content from the Voice of College Football Network. You can also look at different forums, channels, shows, and it has to show all the show schedules right here and the host. Make sure to check out the Voice of College Football's new website at vocfb.com. Once again, vocfb.com.